Speaking to the microphone.
Oh,
Just kidding.
And Ray and Sarah Vaughn.
Sarah Vaughn. V like in Victor, A-U-G-H-N.
Remember the creation of Christ, right? You want us to get a video? I'm going to show you.
Okay.
All right, so everything I share with you is probably going to be review because you've had this whole morning with Chuck. But it helped framework our vision for what we're trying to do in Houston if we go back to the scriptures first and foremost. So I need your help with all of this, all right? So start out down here, and we curve up, and then curve up around again, and somewhere up here is this little area, and it goes in. You guys know what this is?
Hope it's not
No,
Texas.
and then
Oh,
no,
I see.
and then we have this, which I think is like
Italy.
and further out here is Spain and all of that, right? So let's brainstorm together. Where's Jerusalem on this map? Somewhere around here?
Yep.
Is that right? Okay, so Jesus' primary ministry and Peter and all of that, and we see that there was definitely some gospel movement taking place in this area, right? Paul was on his way to Jerusalem in a place called what? Damascus, is that right? Where his conversion was, which is a little bit up further from Jerusalem, right? So that's where he gets converted. Then he goes up later on. Well, he's from Tarsus. Where's Tarsus? Anyone know? Tarsus is around this armpit right here area. This is where Paul's from. And we see that he gets called to go to Antioch, where was kind of like his home base, right? Now from Antioch, he goes down a little bit to his first journey, him and Barnabas. And I'm going to actually draw Crete right here, and then this is Cyprus area, which I actually think might be more up there. But he goes down, I forgot what this is called, but he goes straight to Cyprus, and it's
Pagus.
Palamis, something like that. Paphos is up here. And he shares all around this island, right? And he has a conversion finally up here in Paphos. He doesn't see much over here. But then he knows he goes all the way up here to, I think I want to say, Perga. And then there's Attalia. That's where he comes back down to. And from Perga, he goes to, Antioch up here, right? And then Iconium. Anyone know where Iconium is? It's like right below it.
Yeah,
Somewhere around here.
a little bit.
That's
Yeah.
Pisidian Antioch.
Yep, Pisidian Antioch right here. Iconium, and then below that is Lystra. And then right next to
Derbe.
Lystra is Derbe, that's right. And this sums up majority of his first trip. But he plants churches here in Lystra, here in Derbe, here in Iconium, here in Antioch. In fact, it was in, I think it was Iconium, or was it Lystra where he was left for dead? Anyone know? He was stoned, I think it was in Lystra, because all of the Jews came from Antioch and Iconium down to persecute him in Lystra, where he was left for dead. But then he rises up and he moves on to Derbe, and he continues to preach there. And then he circles back around to appoint elders in all of these churches, and he comes back down somewhere around here to Attalia and this area again to continue to preach before he heads back to Antioch to report the first slideshow of his missionary journey. All right? So this was his first journey. We see some churches, we see some movement start to happen in that area. Second journey, him and Barnabas, right, split up. So Barnabas goes where?
Crete.
Cyprus. I think Barnabas takes John Mark to Cyprus area. So he goes there. So we can assume that there's some type of work and movement happening there, because otherwise he wouldn't have gone there. Probably to go fellowship and follow up with the people there. So that's nice. There's follow-up happening there. And he takes with him Silas back to the Galatia area to continue to strengthen this area. Now by this time there was already some movement that was happening in this area. How do we know? Because we see, who does he pick up in Lystra? Timothy.
Yeah.
And Timothy, he actually gives credit to Timothy's faith as a result of his mother Eunice and Lois, his grandmother, right? And he actually says that Timothy had a reputation in that whole area. So Timothy, before Paul had ever gotten there, was already sowing the gospel broadly. So you see that seeds were being sown without Paul even being there. Well, he takes Timothy with him, and do you know where he goes? He tries to go up this way, but the Spirit blocks him. He tries to go up north. Instead, he comes to Troas, which is right around here, and he has this Macedonian call, this vision to go up to Macedonia, which is way over here. And that's where you see him go up to. The first area was, he actually travels, I think, around this area a couple, but the main one that we'll know is Philippi, right? Significant persecution there, moves down from Philippi to where? Thessalonica, which is not far from Philippi. Thessalonica. Now, we know from the church, or from reading the scriptures of Thessalonica, Thessalonica had some significant movement that took place. In fact, they were an example to all of Macedonia. And from Thessalonica, where does he go? Down south a little bit to a place called Berea, where there's actually reports say that was like they were hungry for the word. They studied the scripture, and he actually left Titus. It was Silas and Timothy here. So he leaves them here. He starts a church in Thessalonica, by the way, and starts a church in Philippi. You also see some movement in Philippi we'll get to next. But he leaves Timothy and Silas in Berea, and he goes down to, by himself, Athens first. And actually this is kind of more like an island, and Sparta's up here, down here, and so Athens is actually more like right there. But he goes to Athens. He sees some things, but not a whole lot. But really, the base of his work in this area is where?
Corinth.
In Corinth, which is on this side, I think. Is that right? It's on the opposite side of...
Yeah.
Sort of. This is more like an island area, right? But as long as you're seeing the picture. But Corinth, he stays for how long?
2 years.
About a year and a half, 2 years, something like that. So 1 year and a half, and his first goes into Corinth by himself still. He moves from Athens to Corinth, and he stays at Priscilla and Aquila's house. Priscilla and Aquila, he stays there for lots of time, starts to build some friendships and reputation with him because he's a tent maker, they're a tent maker. And then these guys come and join him down in Corinth. Well, when they join him, he devotes himself full-time to the work of the Lord, right? And he stays for a year and a half, preaching and teaching all in this area. Well, he then takes Priscilla and Aquila. We assume either, I don't know if Timothy and Silas stayed or if they came with him, but I think they all went to, the next place was Ephesus, where he leaves Priscilla and Aquila there. In fact, they beg him to continue to stay, but he says, no, I need to go on. But he leaves Priscilla and Aquila there, and they become a strong proponent of the work in Ephesus, and he departs and goes back home to Antioch, I think. I think maybe even going back this way, strengthening some of that area, or he sets sail, I can't remember, straight back to Antioch. But he leaves Priscilla and Aquila there. Well, what do we know from scriptures? Who comes down to see Priscilla and Aquila?
Apollos.
And Priscilla and Aquila strengthen Apollos. They bring him back to their other home area, and where Apollos then helps strengthen the work, and they see significant movement here in Corinth. Well, his third journey, he comes back and he's continuing to strengthen. In fact, we see a training center established in Asia where multitudes all have heard the word of the Lord in Acts 19:10 in 2 years' time. We hear that I think from church history says that Epaphras or something from Philippi, I think, helped start the work in, what is this? Colossae.
Yeah.
Paul didn't even go to Colossae, and then right above it is Laodicea, right? And you start to hear in Colossians that their work is sounding forth and starting to ring out as well in those areas. But Paul never even went there. So in a lot of ways, that was the fruit of Paul as a result. But you're starting to see this, and this of course is multiplying as well in that area. So then we get to a scripture passage in Acts chapter 20, verse, what's that?
2020.
No, but he does. He spends time with the Ephesian elders. He says, from day one of me stepping foot, I've not ceased to declare the word of the Lord, all the word of the Lord to you. I know, and he brings all the elders on the beach side. He says, I know that savage wolves are going to come in among you and disturb the flock, but I commend you to the Lord, and I'm going to move on. So you see a real awesome piece of Paul that entrusts the work deeply. Even though he knows that heresy is going to creep in, as much as he tries to guard it, he entrusts the Lord with it. Because his vision is that the glory of the Lord will spread onward. But what we see, he talks about in Acts chapter 20, he says, I think it's verse 4 on through maybe 7, but he talks about how he had certain leaders accompanied to him in this place called Troas. He had kind of like the 7-day mid-level. He had leaders from Thessalonica, and he names them by name. He has leaders from Berea. He had leaders from, I want to say somewhere in Asia. It could be Ephesus. It could be this area. And he had leaders from Derbe, and he had Timothy with him from Lystra. Well, why Troas? Look right in the center of it. It's pretty common for this central theme for all these people to have leaders there. Well, not too long after that, what does he write? Romans. And he writes to Rome, and he says in Romans 15:23, from Jerusalem, down this area, all the way to Iconium, which is really a region way up here, he says, there's no place left for me to share the gospel. And that's a span, according to this, is about 1,500 miles.